Hello, amazing ladies in business. Welcome to the HerStory podcast. I'm your host, Kylie King, the founder of Australian Ladies in Business Initiative, and I am so excited today to be joined by the incredible Alison Wheeler from Alison Wheeler Coaching. So not only is she a business owner, but she's also a high performance coach and is a certified 10X coach with Grant Cardone. And I'm so excited to be joined by her today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to chat with you today.
So let's get started. Can you tell the listeners about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, look, I'm a business coach. I have been coaching now for about 13 years, and helping business owners to create a business that gives you financial freedom, but also time freedom. Because a lot of people start businesses, well, I've found we start businesses because we're really good at what we do, or we have this idea of freedom, but then often we get trapped in the business and we never really kind of get there. So I'm extremely passionate, particularly about having service-based business owners create more revenue, but then that ultimately to be able to scale and give them the time freedom that generally most people are looking for and the reason they go into business in the first place.
Which is so right. Like we want to do it for different freedom. I was just talking to someone recently, they traded their 9 to 5 and now they're in a 24/7. And they've really sort of forgotten the freedom of why they got into business in the first place. So that's so important to, remind someone and have a business coach who can see what's going on from the outside. Because when you're so in it, you can't see.
Yeah, you can't see the writing on the label if you're inside the jar, right?
Yes, exactly. What a great way to put it. So, what got you started in this? What got you started to go, okay, this is what I'm going to do?
Yeah, look, my professional background, I'm an occupational therapist by profession. So that's where I started off. I worked in vocational rehab. So in a lot of businesses or consulting to a lot of businesses gives you a lot of experience, particularly in that area, right? I'm dealing with they're making and breaking people. And part of my role is to go back in and go, why? How do we fix this? What do we do to prevent it? How do we stop this from happening? So you see a lot of like the real inside of a business. And when a business is breaking people a lot, they're also generally not as profitable and productive as they could be. So it's kind of where my consulting coaching started. Then I went into, I've also always had a high level sporting background. So in particular, I have been a pro athlete with Miss Fitness Australia. I have competed at national level in Olympic weightlifting, CrossFit, road for many, many years, a very high level in New Zealand. So that's always been performance has always been a big part of my life. So to me, it just makes sense to have structure and perform at a high level, right? But a lot of people don't know how to do that. So there's all these cross-contextual things that I've been able to put together from my own life and producing results. I've always had the desire to help other people as well, and particularly that flow and effect to families. It's a big driver to me because I know successful businesswomen, it flows into their family, right? And that next generation, happier families, more stability in a family, helps a community as well. Then from there, I flowed into getting to the point where I had my first child, my daughter. She's 15 now. My husband started a network marketing business. I thought he was nuts. I didn't really know what he was starting, to be quite honest with you. But then I built that up to a seven-figure business. That was great. Coaching throughout that time. COVID hit, we couldn't run events, everything changed. But it was great. I mean, it wasn't great at the time, let's be real. But it was great in that it made me reflect on my time was kind of done. I'd grown it as big as I could grow it. There was no more growth, and a big value as mine is continuous growth. So I was stagnant. I couldn't, I just look, no matter how many hours or how much time I put into it, it wasn't going to achieve the goals that I wanted. So I had to make a decision, which was very, very difficult to jump and leap without really knowing what the heck I was building on the way out. So I did that. It took me about a year to figure out how to extract out of that business because I had a very big team of people who were dependent on me. So extracted out of that and then went back to went back to actual coaching directly with business owners outside of that context, outside of the context I've done it before, and then align myself with the 10X brand and Grant Cardone in terms of becoming a 10X aligned or 10X certified coach as well for Australia and New Zealand. So that's kind of my journey. And that realignment, I think, is really important because I was always focused on the goal. Sometimes you have to realize the vehicle isn't going to get you there. But if your whole identity is tied up in the vehicle, which some of mine was, it's really, really hard to pivot and change. And so there was that transitionary period where I was like, who the heck am I? What am I doing? Right. Because I did have part of my identity because I was so successful in that business and I had a lot of altitude and a lot of other stuff goes with that in terms of notoriety, all of that sort of things, as well as golden handcuffs of a decent income. Uh, but it wasn't going to work anymore. So then, yeah, pivoted. And here we are today, basically.
Beautiful. And for anyone that hasn't heard about 10X, so I only just, as I mentioned to you before, I only just learned about it at a business conference. It's a book that I'm starting to listen to. How would you best describe it to the listeners of what 10X is?
Yeah, 10X is more a multiplier or a principle for life. Like there is a whole methodology behind it. So don't get me wrong, it's not quite that simple, but ultimately 10X is about the multiplier that you need to create what you want in your life. And it's not just about business, it is about life. Being able to create your life by design at the level you want. And generally that takes 10 times what you think it is going to. So if we have the right estimation of effort in our mind and we break away from middle class thinking, because a lot of people are stuck in what is the norm or what middle class thinking is, and it's keeping us stuck because it's not freedom. There is no freedom there. And it won't be long and that whole area won't exist because it's going to like, and you see it's getting smaller and smaller. What was enough to live off 10 years ago, there's no way it's enough to live off now. I mean, even 3 years ago, right? You look at the cost of everything. So it's about ensuring that you are getting yourself, your wealth, your business, everything working for you how you want and how to prioritize those things. And from a business standpoint, it's very, very much a science of there's 7 steps to do, and they go round and round and round, and taking people through break points in business so that they really can get outside of that middle class, what we think is freedom, but it really isn't. It's only just enough. And who wants to live with just enough where you're worried about where the next paycheck's coming from? Statistically, in Australia, we know that majority of business owners pay them less than the average wage.
Yes.
That's a problem. Like it is actually a major problem here in Australia. That is not okay. And it doesn't have to be that way if people know what to do. But again, most people are wonderful practitioners. They're really good at what they do, or they're chasing freedom, but do they know how to run their business? And also, do they stop at all to run their business instead of being in their business, right? Work on it, not in it. Yes, you need to work in it, particularly different phases. You may wear every hat. But at some point you have to work on it or it won't grow.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that's such a good reminder to anyone that is listening is because, yeah, you are so stuck in it or trying to get everything done that it's not really growing or doing anything. Because as you mentioned, that beautiful analogy before about, if you're stuck in the jar, you can't read the label. So,
Exactly.
and this
Exactly.
is why it's so important too to reach out to business coaches such as yourself to go, okay, you have experience in this, you've grown a business into where a lot of people want to go. This is where I need help. And I think more small business owners need to see that it is such a valuable thing to do and to reach out and to say, hey, I am a great practitioner, but I'm not good at running a business. You have that experience. Can you please assist?
Yeah, exactly. And a big one too, and this is something I had to learn because I really sucked at it, is asking for help. But knowing that asking for help isn't a failure,
Yeah.
It's like, why waste so much time struggling away, not knowing what you're doing when you could just ask for help and you could jump many so much heartache and so much time. And I really struggle for this because I'm like, as an independent, strong woman, it's like, yeah, but you can do it. Well, yes, I can. But does that mean that that is the best choice for me to move forward at the speed I want? And is it okay to give up a little bit of that control here to have and to be vulnerable enough to say, hey, you know what, safe person over here that I can speak to, I'm really not coping. I actually don't know because as an independent, strong woman, you want to come across that you know.
Yes.
And particularly like to your clients, that imagery that we need to portray that we've got it all together. We don't necessarily want our clients or our customers to know that we are having our own struggles. Now, there's an element of that of authenticity that is fine to share, but then it goes too far. So who then are you sharing it with? And most of my clients, right, the further that and more successful they are, the more isolated they are because there's less and less people that they can speak to and be vulnerable with about what's really going on because they can't share it with their staff. They don't necessarily want to share it with the partner. So then who then? And they don't get out of it unless they share it.
Yeah. That's a really good point. Sometimes we don't want to share with the people around us, whether it's they don't understand or at that level, or we just don't feel comfortable to. And getting a business coach can do that. And you can share all of that stuff, which is another great way to look at it. And I've interviewed many coaches and they've never actually brought up that point as being such a valid point. So thank you, Alison, for sharing that, because sometimes you just need that listening board or that person.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. A sounding board, right? And because we get stuck that like we said at the beginning, you're inside the jar. You created the problem. I've created my problem. Like if you have the viewpoint that you are responsible for your outcomes for your life, etc., highly recommend you do, whether it's true or not. It's
Mhm.
just easier to operate that way. If you operate that you are responsible for what you're creating, then you created the problems that you are currently facing, whether you like them or not. So, but if you want to outcreate them, the same thinking, the same viewpoint isn't going to outcreate that problem because you just created it with that thinking. So that's where being able to have that external viewpoint or someone help you to have that external viewpoint, because sometimes we just can't see it, to go, hey, look at this, or have you thought of this, or whatever, that ability to go and just to get unstuck. We can spend a big problem with businesses that, you know, like I said earlier, they're not paying themselves more than the average wage, or alternatively, um, your income isn't growing, right? Your business isn't growing, don't know how to grow it. A big problem is you're not talking to anyone about how to expand. How do I get past the stuck point? And there are break points in business. Like there is a science to that side of it. There are break points from everywhere, from 0 to 1 million. There's break points. A break point at 250. There's a break point at 400. There's a break point at 800. There's a break point at 1 million. And then we jump 1 to 3 million. There's a break point there, and so on and so forth. There are break points. You have to know how to navigate through those break points in order to actually get out of them, because if you don't, then you slide backwards and we get this roller coaster. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced that. I have. Worst thing ever. Roller coastering your income. It I don't know about you, Kylie, but when that used to happen to me all the time, in my previous business, I lost so much certainty and confidence because I couldn't work out what I was doing wrong. I didn't know. I'm like, what is this? What's happening? Why can't I stabilize this, right? Not to say that there's not ebbs and flows, but it doesn't have to be a roller coaster. There are ways to stabilize it and continue to move to new levels, because normal is improvement. Normal is not stationary, Kylie. It is normal to gradually improve, and it's important that people understand that.
Mhm.
Often if people, I just like to stay the same, and I'm like, how can you? There is no such thing as life. Look at a tree, it loses its leaves for a reason. Nothing stays the same, and if you're trying to just hold your business at the same, you will go backwards, because even if we look at what's happening in the economy now, prices go up. So you're just trying to stay the same. Your profit margins are now getting all eaten up by the fact that you want to stay the same, and the expense of everything, wages, cost of goods, power in your own house, everything's gone up. So there has to be this adjustment all the time of evolution and growth. And like I said, it's actually normal to improve. A flat line in your stats, and I guess that brings me to, do you even track your stats? Took me a long time with this one too, Kylie, because I was just, shoot me now if I have to track any stats. Right, because I'm like, I hate numbers. I just want to do the work. But now I've learned to love numbers because they tell me so much. They lead you to the pathway forward.
No, they are. And I think it's a really good, like you mentioned, that roller coaster. There's a lot of people, even in the community today, that are talking about the feast and famine cycle. And they're going through this major thing where, they were feasting for quite some time and now it's all famine and they're struggling and they don't know what to do. And then they make decisions out of desperation that actually can be more damaging to their brand than it can be good, really.
Exactly. And if you know, it's a preparedness, and I guess there's that 10x side, having your business resolute enough that it you can handle and weather storms. Like right now, right? We have a cyclone about to hit here on the Gold Coast in Brisbane. Now, I could be unprepared or I can be prepared. And it's as simple as that. We prepare for weather storms in our house, but are you prepared for weather storms in your business? Because they will come.
Yes.
And we can bury our head in the sand like an ostrich or an emu and try and pretend they're never going to get here. But what are you doing to prepare it? Like simple things. Do you have bank accounts that are separated out, that, income comes, one, have a separate business bank account, but the income comes into that account. Then do you separate it out for your tax, for your marketing, for future development, whatever, right? Paying yourself. How are you actually putting your funds aside to future-proof your business?
Yeah.
And, it's not always about the amount either. Like when you're first starting out, that amount might be $1. It's about the habit as well. Because as you build that just becomes a habitual habit. Like I've always put my tax aside, no matter what, same amount, same percentage. And then then obviously I know that I'm completely covered, and then I can adjust that when tax time comes around, because inevitably it's usually a different figure. I usually I put aside more than I know that I'm going to need, because I work it off a percentage overall, right? That I believe will be around X figure. So then I'm never surprised. But some people will spend the money as well. Often people spend the money before it's hit their bank account.
Yes. Yes. Yes, I've heard that. Or even then they become GST registered, or they don't GST register. They go and do their tax. They realize, oh, I earned more than because they weren't tracking their stats, as you mentioned. And they're like, here's this big GST bill that they weren't prepared for.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. Again, how often do you track your numbers? How often do you look at them? I had a conversation with someone recently, and they did their yearly review at the end of the year, and they only look at their numbers quarterly, and they realized in the last quarter they were at a loss, and a big loss, and they were in trouble. And I'm like, but you have a really fluid business. Is there any particular reason you haven't been looking at your numbers on a weekly basis? So you're on the pulse of your business. But they hadn't considered looking at them weekly because the accountant said, look at them quarterly. I'm like, but your accountant looks at them in retrospect. You can't do anything about it then. It's too late. Right? Like, so if, and sometimes we don't want to look at the numbers, like I said, because I used to hate looking at my numbers too, because I didn't like what I saw or I didn't understand them. So what I did is I'm like, all right, I really don't understand this P&L business in my zero account. I can't read it. I don't really get it. So I'm like, okay, accountant, teach me. I booked in to do sessions with my accountant and bookkeeper to say, hey, can you please teach me what I need? What does all this mean? What do I need to know? What are the main things that I need to be looking at so I can understand? This is what I want to understand, but how do I read this so that I can make sure that, it's super clear.
Yeah. And I think that's important too, to know aspects of your business. Like, it can be understanding to not have to know everything and have the ability to outsource, but something as important as your numbers, because they can make or break your business, as you just mentioned, like having a big loss of it, like, and not realizing till after, or getting smashed with a huge tax bill, that's automatically putting you on the back foot.
Exactly. And I'm not saying, like you said, that you have to do everything in your business. There will become a time where delegation and duplication is essential for growth. You will need to do that absolutely, wholeheartedly, right? Um, but there's a time. There's a time. And it's not that you then lose sight of it, just again, accept full responsibility. It's still your business to be responsible for.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a time until you sell your business where you still don't have a level of responsibility for ensuring outcomes because you've taken the highest level of risk because you are the one that chose to start the business. Therefore, you're still responsible for it. Smart outsourcing, super important.
Mm. So, as being a business owner with all your experience, what would you say so far has been your biggest challenge?
For me, would be realizing when my business model had done its time and pivoting
Mm.
because it took a whole identity recreation. Because I had mistakenly tied my identity to my business and my business functions and not to my goals. That by far the hardest thing. Because I had people dependent on me and I felt like I was letting them down. I left them like ultimately I did not. But I felt like it.
Mm. And if we flip that, what would you say has been your biggest achievement?
One of my most recent achievements was in the 10X world, we had a 90-day revenue challenge that ran. Super cool, so much fun. The goal was because he'd been on Undercover Billionaire, right? And the TV series that Discovery put on, they take billionaires, they go dump them in the middle of nowhere with $100 in a beat up car. They can't use their name and a telephone, right?
Yeah.
And they have to try and achieve growing $1 million business in 90 days. He did 5 million in a $5 million value business in 90 days. And he wanted to create that in like with businesses in the real world. So he set a challenge to do $1 million increase in revenue in 90 days. And I was one of the coaches that was part of that program as well for coaching those businesses. And I was the only person to achieve that with one of my coaching clients. So we increased their revenue by $1 million in 90 days. And it
That's
was just the coolest. It was so much fun. It was full on, right? Don't get me wrong, because it takes a big commitment to get to that. But it was also a hell of a lot of fun.
that sounds incredible. And if you don't mind me asking, how was that business performing before you were able to get them to that mark?
So they were a successful business with a developed product, obviously not a startup, but they were flatlining and they
Oh,
were dejected and they were losing hope on how they were going to grow. So their numbers were just flatlined and they were stuck. Really, really stuck. They didn't know how to grow it from there. And then, they've just exponentially grown.
that's incredible. Well done. That's awesome. And you were the only
Yeah.
one to do it. Go
I
you.
was the only one in the world to do it. So that is very exciting.
Fantastic. So, is there any advice you wish? So, we talked about that established business, but if we look at startups, is there any advice you would give to startup businesses right now who, want to achieve that $1 million, but at the moment they're just trying to, buy the groceries with their business and get through it?
Yeah, look, I think it's really, really important to know what your goals are because most people that I speak to are not clear on their goals and targets.
Yeah.
And it has to start from there. If it is $1 million business, great. But are you committed to that? And have you done the math on what that might look like? Have you reversed engineered yourself out of that goal? And do you write your goals down daily? Because life is challenging, right? There are so many competing priorities. If you aren't focused on what you're creating in the future, you'll just keep drawing the past forward. You'll keep focused on your problems. It's so essential to write your goals out every day as a ritual, every morning. If you need to do it every morning and every night because you're feeling, off center or whatever, great, do that because it's you putting your future there. What happens then is your mind will continue to try and solve that new problem and come up with ideas for you on how to solve that new problem. Now, admittedly, most of the time those ideas come up at most inconvenient times where you're nowhere near anything to be able to action them, but most people have their phones on them, take notes. Action it when you can. Put it in your calendar as an action step, right? But it's having that laser focus on that goal over and keep putting that goal there. Keep putting that goal there. Never lower your targets, increase your activity.
Beautiful. I love that. That's awesome. And that's something that I'm going to take away from this because I don't write my goals down daily, but I can see how that would be beneficial to do that. So
Absolutely.
that's great advice.
Excellent. Well, I am glad and I hope people have had loads of takeaways from today.
Yes, thank you so much. And where do we stalk you, Alison? Where do we find you?
Yeah, easiest places on my socials. So for Instagram, for example, you can put them all in the show notes if you like, which is at the Alison Wheeler Coaching, or on my website, which is the Alison Wheeler.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me and sharing all of your stuff. And yeah, I'll see you in the community.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carly, for having me.